Hello and welcome to my video presentation of my digital unit plan. My name is Charles Webster and I'll be showing you my digital unit plan, which covers America's involvement in World War II. To begin, here is the home page of my digital unit plan website. On this page I include a summary of what the unit will include. I also include the subject, the grade level down here, the big ideas, student learning objectives, and each of the California content standards that will be addressed by this unit. For this unit, it will be an 11th grade U.S. history unit, which will, as I said, cover World War II, and I want to make sure that upon completing this unit, all of my students have a deeper understanding of each of these ideas and important concepts that I have listed down here. The big ideas that I want my students to focus on in the lessons I'll be discussing later. I want them to focus on America's entry into World War II. Right here, not only do I want them to grasp the significance of Pearl Harbor and the effect that it had in U.S. history in bringing the U.S. into the war, but I also want them to understand how the course of U.S. foreign policy, because so many are unaware of how much of America felt about the war prior to Pearl Harbor, so it's remarkable to see how this event helped to forever change U.S. foreign policy since then. Students will be focusing on this in Lesson 1, which is my teacher lecture that covers the road to Pearl Harbor, in which they'll analyze the lecture material to then complete the guided notes, which I'll show you later. I also want them to be able to understand the effects that World War II had on Japanese Americans who prior to World War II had lived and were treated as American citizens. Then, with Pearl Harbor and the threat that Japan posed, the U.S. government decided to intern these people for simply being of a Japanese ancestry and held them against their will in camps without them ever having committed a crime. So it's important for students of U.S. history to understand that the effects of World War II went beyond the battles and the fighting. Other people were hurt at home by their government, and this deserves to be studied. So students will extensively study this material during Lesson 2, which is actually a web quest, which I'll be talking about later. The other big idea that I want students to focus on is the development of the atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project, and the decision by the U.S. government to drop the bomb on Japan. I believe it's one thing to understand when, where, and how it happened, but it's just as important, in my opinion, to study why the U.S. government made that decision, and to study how that decision affected the Japanese as well as the future of the U.S. and of the world through the creation of such a powerful weapon. This big idea, or these objectives, will be covered in Lesson 3, which is my atomic bomb timeline assignment, which I'll focus on later as well. So here is Lesson 1, the teacher lecture presentation, which I provide for my students. So here's where I give my students access to the teacher lecture and guided notes, which allow them to then look through the presentation that I've made for them. On this page, the students can access either the PowerPoint right here or the Prezi presentation, and download their guided notes down here as a PDF or a Word file in case they need to. This presentation covers the events leading up to and surrounding Pearl Harbor. It provides students with an overview of the beginning of World War II in Europe and in the Pacific prior to U.S. involvement. As students proceed through the presentation, they come across various pictures, videos, audio clips, and information about the cash and carry policy, isolationism, interventionism, the Lend-Lease Act, etc. And they're asked several questions during the presentation as well as in their guided notes, which they are meant to fill out in order to help them to better ascertain what the key concepts and ideas are that I would like them to focus on. So down here are the guided notes, like I said, which have a mixture of different types of questions in which students are asked to read graphs, which help to improve graph literacy, and free response and fill in the blank questions. Students are asked to draw and color in a map. They're asked to draw flags, so they aren't just repeating back word for word the material found in the lecture material. Lesson 2 can be found here, and that is what I created for students to be learning about Japanese American internment. So it's a web quest which students will complete. They can download it as a PDF or a Word file down here. They simply follow the links and the directions that are located in these green shaded boxes. Each of these links are all very different with different videos, articles, and the students are meant to go to these websites and to use the information found there in order to be able to respond to and answer correctly, fill out and answer this web quest. This assignment includes a variety of questions. Rather than simply having them recall content for every question, I challenge them to take the information and synthesize it to produce a lengthier response. I also have them analyzing primary source documents, like right here, the executive order itself, and I have them listening to the words of those who actually lived in the internment camps, which is actually down here. It's part of a interactive media experience created by the Smithsonian. So they're challenged to have them make sense of that information themselves. So not only do they study about the process of the of internment and the conditions of the camps, they're studying about also from the perspective of those who actually went through it. And I also have them learning about the case of Fred Korematsu versus the United States down here, and evaluating the arguments of the majority and the dissenting opinions, considering whether the U.S. government has done enough to make amends in the years following World War II. Having them, it's higher order thinking. They're not just spitting back a response. They have to actually take in the information and produce something on their own. Then up here I have lesson 3, which is my graphic organizer assignment. This assignment is a timeline assignment that I created about the atomic bomb. Here's a picture of the atomic bomb, the explosion of the atomic bomb and the aftermath. I have the directions located right here. So here I have them focusing on the events surrounding the Manhattan Project and the development of the bomb itself. They're to create a timeline using the timeline.js tool right here, with a partner. They're to create this timeline, and I have them including at least 18 different events to be placed in chronological order, which they are to then provide a brief explanation of, including the significance of the event. I also have a tutorial video explaining how to construct a timeline on timeline.js, just because it can be kind of confusing or difficult at first to understand how to use the tool. I also provide the resources that I recommend they use in order to be able to create the timeline, to find the information necessary to be able to complete it. And then I provide a sample timeline for my students to be able to look at, which covers the period 1939 to 1945 and meets all the necessary requirements. So this kind of gives them an idea of what there should somewhat look like in order to receive full points. What the information that it should have, how it should look. There should be pictures. It should be well made in order to receive full points. And I also provide a grading rubric down here for students to be able to reference, to be able to not only to be able to self-assess and to determine whether or not their timeline is meeting the necessary requirements, but it is also for me to use once they've completed the timelines, for me to be able to evaluate and to assess their timelines, so that nobody is surprised at the end as to what grade they receive. And then down here I have further resources and videos for them to be able to use, and places for them to download the instructions and the rubric themselves. Then over here I have the unit resources page, which includes several links to different websites, videos, interactives, even primary sources for them to be able to use. My two favorite links are right here, these two videos, which cover World War II. They're about 10 to 15 minutes each. They give a broad overview, but it breaks it down and makes it very easy to understand. I also have a link right here, number 2, the U.S. and World War II from study.com, provides them opportunities to take several multiple choice quizzes so they can test their knowledge, maybe practice before an exam, and then just a bunch of links which they can use to maybe incorporate into completing the lessons that I mentioned before. And over here I have the assessments page right here. This page includes a summary of how students will be evaluated during this unit, from the entry level to the formative to the summative, and how those will help me to determine whether or not students have met the objectives that I've set for them. The entry level includes a quick write. Formative, I included the lessons such as the guided notes, the Weber size, and the timeline, but I also included a new Kahoot quiz that I created, Quizlet flashcards, and exit tickets that can be used in order to determine whether students are learning the material as they should. And then down here, the two summative assessments, which include a museum exhibit project and presentation, in which the students will, in groups, be tasked with creating a quote-unquote artifact, as well as a museum label related to a particular topic of World War II. And then an in-class essay, which will respond to the question, how did the events of World War II influence the U.S. and its development? Here is the formative assessment that I was talking about, the Kahoot quiz. And this one in particular is made, supposed to be made for, to be following the teacher lecture on the Manhattan Project, and to examine the decision to use the atomic bomb. So this can be used during either mid-lesson or at the end of the lesson, and it's just to inform me, the teacher, of whether or not the students are retaining the material as they should. You can play in teams or you can play individually. All they need is the pin code to the game. They can pull out their phones or go on their iPads or Chromebooks, and I could put this up on the screen and we all can see what everyone answered, who came in first place, second place, third place, and it just kind of gives me, the teacher, a chance to see how everyone's doing. And then down here I have the directions for the summative assessment, which will take place at the end of the unit. It's supposed to be a 4-page double-spaced essay, so about 2 pages, that they write in class. They're able to choose to examine at least 2 different ways in which World War II altered the development of the U.S. And they will be using their Chromebooks in order to be able to do this in class. They're also encouraged to bring their completed guided notes and Weber size worksheets and the lessons that we completed previously in order to help them in this task. And I set out detailed directions and an explanation of what is expected of them in order to accomplish this. I also include a rubric, just as I did before, in order for students to be able to be assessed, for me to evaluate how they did on their essays, but they may also look at this beforehand in order to determine, have they prepared well enough? Will they be able to meet each of these requirements in order to earn full points? And then over here at the very top, I have the unit plan template, which is embedded here. This is basically a condensed version of this website, explaining the unit goals, the summary, the standards, and each of the assessments and the learning objectives, and how I determine if they have achieved them, along with the resources that are used in each of the assignments, and some websites the students will be able to use in order to help them throughout the unit. And then up here I have also a link back to my class website in case they need it, and then it's also linked back to the unit plan right here. And yeah, that's pretty much it for my unit plan. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Thank you so much.